They laughed. The entire alien delegation laughed when the human doctor placed the tiny blue jar on the table. "This is your remedy," they scoffed. "A tribal ointment?" But hours later, the laughter turned to stunned silence. One by one, the aliens were forced to admit what no one expected, that Earth's most underestimated cure might be the most powerful thing they had ever encountered. And it wasn't nanobots or gene therapy. It was Vicks Vaporub. It began on the Galactic Medical Exchange Station, Gamma Sector, Dock 7, where species from across the stars gathered to share knowledge, debate, and occasionally mock the primitive methods of backwater civilizations. Earth, still relatively new to the galactic community, had sent its best. Dr. Maya Run, a seasoned general physician from Delhi with a stubborn streak and a suitcase full of samples. The symposium was buzzing with alien technologies, floating nanodrones, hyperregeneration serums, molecular reassembly sprays, and Maya had to fight the urge to roll her eyes every time someone looked at her Earth-made remedies with disdain. When the representative from the Thraxian Dominion, a species known for their 10 tentacles and egos twice that number, sneezed violently during a presentation, Maya casually slid a small, familiar jar across the polished obsidian table. "Try this," she said with a smile. The Thraxian recoiled, his eyes narrowing at the foreign object. "What is this primitive paste?" Maya just shrugged. "Something my grandmother used. Works every time." The alien scoffed, but desperate, dipped one of his tendrils in and applied it near his olfactory ridges. What followed was a mixture of alarm, awe, and, eventually, relief. The cool burn of menthol slammed into his sinuses like a freight train made of mint and camphor. For a moment, he panicked, thinking he had inhaled a volatile toxin. But then, something miraculous happened. The congestion vanished. His breathing normalized. The itching in his throat eased. The irritation in his secondary lungs stopped. He stood still, blinking, absorbing what had just happened. "This vapor substance," he whispered. "It's effective." Maya grinned. "Told you." Word spread like wildfire. Soon, more aliens came to her table, not with respect, but with skepticism. The Alari diplomat suffering from throat mold? Cleared in 2 days. The KR, their brood mother with congested egg lungs, slept peacefully for the first time in a cycle. Even the cold-blooded Xanathi, whose metabolism rendered most medicines inert, reported unusually soothing sensations after applying Vicks to the inside of their armored neck flaps. Maya found herself giving lectures, not on antibiotics or Earth surgical procedures, but on Vicks. How to use it, where to apply it, when not to eat it. Yes, some tried. And while some remained doubtful, others, those who had felt it, started calling it the Blue Miracle. What no one had predicted was how this tiny blue jar would challenge galactic pharmaceutical monopolies. The Vaporub formula, simple, cheap, and made from ingredients like menthol, eucalyptus, camphor, bypassed centuries of synthetic biotech and didn't require nanoassistance or AI diagnostics. It worked, not because it was complex, but because it targeted the body's ancient, primal systems with timeless remedies. Some races even discovered that Vicks helped regulate biofields and micropulses in ways their own technology couldn't replicate. And when the corporate reps from Madocore Intergalactic tried to discredit Maya, claiming she was pushing aromatic witchcraft, they ended up sneezing uncontrollably in a live interview. Maya offered them a jar with the same calm smile. They refused, prideful. The galaxy roasted them for weeks. What followed was a phenomenon. Black market trading of Vicks among frontier planets. Alien YouTubers doing first-time trying Vicks reaction videos, some fainting, some crying, most loving it. A cult on Zeta 9 formed, believing Vicks to be the sweat of a healing god. Galactic pharmacies began importing it by the crate. The jar itself became iconic, blue, humble, and infinitely powerful. Maya, who once stood ridiculed in that sterile symposium, was now being offered positions on interstellar health boards, ambassador roles, and product deals. She refused most. "It's not me," she would say, holding up the little jar. "It's Grandma's medicine." Still, not every species reacted the same. One group, the Heshkai, experienced psychedelic dreams if they applied it under their secondary eyelids, a practice Maya strongly advised against. Another race, the Creole, became addicted to the smell, rubbing it into their fur to the point of glowing blue. It got weird, but the effectiveness could not be denied. Vicks wasn't just a remedy, it was a cultural bridge, a symbol of Earth's underestimated wisdom. Back on Earth, companies were baffled by the sudden spike in interstellar sales. Demand overwhelmed supply. Factories in India and Mexico ran 24/7. Menthol prices spiked. Influencers across planets started adding #Vaporub challenge to their vids. And the most surreal moment came when the Galactic Medical Council declared Vicks Vaporub a tier, one universal remedy, a classification shared by only 5 other treatments in known space, all of which required a lab, a degree, and at least one sentient AI. But perhaps the most touching moment happened weeks later, when Maya returned to her small flat on Earth. Her grandmother was waiting, knitting quietly. Maya handed her a galactic scroll with gold etchings. "You've been honored," she said. Her grandmother just smiled and pointed to the kitchen. "Good. Now go heat some water. You sound congested." Maya chuckled, her heart warm with a blend of pride and irony. After all the breakthroughs, the awards, the interstellar praise, it was still her grandmother's voice that held the greatest authority. She moved to the stove, boiled the water, and scooped her finger of the precious blue bomb into the pot. The vapors rose like incense, strong, sharp, familiar, carrying with them memories of childhood colds, rainy monsoons, and that comforting hand rubbing the salve on her chest with quiet love. For all the alien recognition, it was this simple ritual that meant the most. As she inhaled deeply, Maya realized that what had won over the galaxy wasn't just a medicine, it was the feeling that came with it. Warmth. A fight against helplessness. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the ripple effect was undeniable. Alien civilizations began to reevaluate Earth's place in the medical hierarchy. It wasn't just about technology anymore. It was about efficacy, empathy, and tradition. The notion that advanced meant better was crumbling, replaced by an appreciation for balance, intuition alongside science, simplicity alongside sophistication. Maya found herself consulting with research teams on hundreds of alien worlds, advising them not just on Vicks but on the philosophy it represented. She introduced them to turmeric for inflammation, ginger for nausea, mustard oil massages, and steam therapy. Suddenly, the Earth's old wives' tales were being dissected in alien labs, published in prestigious journals, even adopted into Starship medkits. Some doubters remained. On the hyper-intellectual planet of Axon 5, the scientists refused to acknowledge the bomb's power until one of their own, afflicted with a rare oxygen blood imbalance, accidentally rubbed Vicks on his chest in a failed imitation of a viral challenge. He awoke the next day symptom-free and declared the sensation a holy breath. From that moment on, even the Oxoni developed a grudging respect for Earth's blue jar. But it wasn't just the medicine's impact that grew. It was Maya's legend. Children in distant colonies dressed up as her for Galactic Culture Day. The phrase "trust the human" became slang for "give it a try. It might just work." Someone even wrote a ballad called The Minty Miracle that topped alien charts for 9 weeks. Yet, Maya remained grounded. She turned down a statue on Mars, declined when a race of sentient vapor beings wanted to name a nebula after her. What mattered more to her was how people, beings, felt better, breathed easier, slept peacefully. She didn't cure war or end disease, but she had offered comfort, and in a universe full of chaos, that was rare enough to be sacred. And as galactic commerce tried to reverse engineer the formula, they came to a startling conclusion. It couldn't be duplicated perfectly, not because the ingredients were secret, but because something in the way it was made, perhaps the balance of oils, or the old machines that had been running for decades, or maybe even the stubborn love of every grandmother who ever swore by it, resisted synthetic perfection. The universe had to buy it from Earth, or go without. This led to an economic windfall, yes, but also a humbling truth. Sometimes the smallest comforts hold the greatest power. So when Maya was invited back to the Galactic Symposium, this time as the keynote speaker, she didn't bring drones or slides or samples. She brought one thing, a battered, half-used jar of Vicks Vaporub. She held it up before the crowd of blinking eyes, tentacles, fur, and scales, and said, "You call it primitive. I call it personal." There was silence, then a sniffle, then thunderous applause. In the weeks that followed Maya's historic keynote speech, the galaxy saw a quiet transformation. Medical councils from dozens of worlds began integrating not just Vicks Vaporub, but an entire category of cultural life remedies into their official healthcare protocols. Not as replacements for high-tech treatments, but as trusted supplements. Words like balm, rub, and home remedy started appearing in alien dialects, their phonetic translations whispered with a reverence once reserved for quantum elixirs. Even hardened military fleets began carrying Vicks in their emergency kits, not because they believed in miracles, but because soldiers who applied it simply slept better under foreign stars. On the fringe world of Baltor, where plasma storms made sleep almost impossible, human volunteers introduced the idea of rubbing a small amount on the chest before rest. The alien children, initially wary of the pungent scent, grew to associate it with dreams that were peaceful instead of panic-filled. In time, the Baltorans developed their own ritual, a nightly blessing spoken over the open jar before bed. They didn't understand Earth languages, but the words they mimicked were Mima said this helps. Somewhere in the cosmos, Maya's grandmother would have smiled. Maya herself became something of a nomad, traveling from world to world, not as a healer in the traditional sense, but as a bridge between cultures. She was asked to speak at interplanetary universities, serve as a cultural ambassador, even co-host an alien wellness show. But she never stopped being a doctor. Even in the middle of high-profile events, if someone sniffled, coughed, or rubbed their throat, she would quietly slide a jar across the table. No words needed. That became her signature. No speeches, no boasts, just the blue jar, and a gentle smile that said, "Trust me, you'll breathe easier." Her most emotional encounter came when she visited the planet Kaethel, home to a species of insectoid scholars with complex respiratory systems. Their air-processing organs were delicate, and they had long struggled with infections caused by space dust. Medical science had helped somewhat, but not completely. Maya watched as one of the young Kaethalians, barely the size of her hand, shivered and wheezed in a clinic. She asked permission and applied the tiniest dab near its wing hinges. Within seconds, its vibration steadied, its breathing normalized, and for the first time in days, it chirped, a sound of comfort in their language. The mother wept. Maya did too. And so, Vicks Vaporub became more than a medicine. It became a symbol of humility, of heritage, of the truth that sometimes the universe's most powerful cures don't come from labs orbiting neutron stars, but from the loving hands of someone who sat beside you at night, held your chest, and whispered, "This will help." Across countless worlds, statues were erected, not of Maya, but of an open jar, wisps of vapor swirling from its top, surrounded by words in dozens of languages all meaning the same thing. From Earth, with care. In her old age, Maya returned home, finally tired of traveling, content to walk the same Delhi streets she had grown up on. Children would spot her and run up, not asking for autographs, but proudly showing her their own little jars. Some had custom labels. Some were alien knockoffs. One even glowed in the dark. Maya always smiled and said the same thing. "Does it work?" When they nodded, she would laugh gently. Then that's all that matters. And one night, as she sat on her balcony watching a ship streak across the stars, Maya reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a familiar jar, dented, scratched, but still full of scent. She rubbed a little on her chest, closed her eyes, and breathed deep. Somewhere, in a galaxy that once mocked Earth's medicine, 100 species were doing the same. Not because they had to, but because they believed in it. Because they believed in her. Maya's quiet evenings in Delhi became sacred to her, filled with chai, news from alien embassies delivered by courier drones, and long-distance messages from students scattered across the stars. Some were human. Many were not. They sent her stories, little updates on how Vicks was being used in their worlds. A mining colony on an asteroid belt had started using it to prevent respiratory flare-ups from dust inhalation. A sentient tree species on Orphatau discovered that the rub helped soothe their seed nodes during seasonal bloom stress. On Draxel 3, Vicks was now part of military survival packs and ceremonial grief rituals, the scent reminding them that even loss could be softened. The vapor had become something like incense in those places, not just a tool for healing but for memory, for grounding, for comfort. The galactic culture had quietly shifted, almost without realizing it. For all their biotech marvels, They had come to accept a truth humans had always known. There's a kind of healing that can't be scanned or synthesized. It's in the ritual, the scent, the gentle hand on a fevered brow. Vicks had not conquered disease, but it had conquered Faye. And in a universe of terrifying unknowns, that was no small thing. Maya herself grew slower with age, but her spirit remained sharp. She was invited once more, perhaps for the last time, to the Council of Medical Ethics on Zenith Prime, where they offered her the honorary title of Mother of Interstellar Comfort. It was the highest honor in medical compassion. She chuckled when they handed it to her. "My grandmother would have just told you to drink some ginger tea and sleep it off," she said to the council, who, though composed of beings made of plasma, gas, and light, bowed their heads with respect. Her story eventually passed into galactic legend, especially among frontier species just meeting humans for the first time. Ask them about the blue jar, they were told. It will change your life. Some treated it like sacred ritual. Others commercialized it to absurd degrees, branding their own variants, Vapor Nebula, Rub X Prime, even a luxury line made with crystals and shimmer dust. But none could quite replicate the original. Even in a future where humanity eventually mastered nanomedicine and cellular reconstruction, Vicks remained untouched. It didn't need updates. It didn't need patents or patches or programming. It needed only to be applied with intention. In the final years of her life, Maya rarely left Earth. But one day, she received a strange visitor, a Fraxian diplomat, descendant of the very same being who had once mocked her during the first symposium. He came not to debate or inspect, but to offer thanks. He placed before her a glass cube, inside which hovered a preserved copy of the original jar she'd given his ancestor. He kept it, the Fraxian said. Said it reminded him that wisdom doesn't always come wrapped in wires and glowing lights. Maya smiled, the memories washing over her. He finally believed in it, she asked. The diplomat tilted his elongated head. No, he believed in you. And with that, Maya knew her mission had been fulfilled. Not just to spread medicine, but to defend the dignity of Earth's legacy, of the small, unspoken acts of healing passed down through generations. She had proven, not with technology, but with love, that Earth's medicine was never primitive, only personal. When Maya passed, it was said that for a full rotation on several planets, clinics and healing stations observed a minute of quiet, punctuated only by the opening of a Vicks jar. The scent filled the air across worlds, drifting into vents, domes, and open plains. Patients breathed in deeply. Doctors stood still. And somewhere, across the stars, a child asked, "What's that smell?" And someone smiled and replied, "That's what comfort smells like." Maya Wren's passing wasn't just mourned, it was felt. Across worlds where her name had become synonymous with warmth and healing, beings of every form held silent ceremonies. Some lit candles. Others released bioluminescent spores into the air. On Viridian 6, a moon covered entirely in water, the aquatic citizens swam in spiraling patterns through infused currents laced with menthol and eucalyptus, forming glowing blue trails in her honor. And on 8th, her old apartment in Delhi was turned into a quiet museum, not filled with glass cases and velvet ropes, but with couches, teacups, hand-knit blankets, and the soft scent of camphor in the air. Visitors came not to look, but to sit, to breathe, to feel what she had given the universe, peace. But her impact didn't stop there. Generations of alien medics trained using what was now called the Wren Protocol, a blend of high science and sensory care, where every diagnosis came with a checklist not only of symptoms, but sensations. Are you cold? Are you scared? Does anything remind you of home? Medicine, they were taught, was not just chemical, it was emotional. Her teachings emphasized the therapeutic power of scent, memory, and touch. And while Vicks Vaporub remained the flagship symbol of this philosophy, Maya's influence inspired other human remedies to rise. Turmeric compresses for joint pain, hot honey lemon for throat burns, neem oil for skin rashes. Even chicken soup was trialed on a few compatible species, with mixed results, though one crustacean race claimed it unlocked ancient memories. A holographic mural of Maya was installed at the Galactic Medical Archives, depicting her not in a lab coat, but in a cotton shawl, holding out a tiny blue jar to an alien child with a runny nose. No crown, no throne, just care, offered freely. It became one of the most visited artifacts in the sector, especially by young healers still unsure if compassion had a place in science. They came with questions. They left with purpose. One particularly ambitious alien species, the logic-driven neuronids, began constructing an AI library to codify all of Earth's ancient remedies. But the project stalled when the algorithms couldn't quantify the soothing warmth that Vicks gave. Error, undefined variable, comfort, the logs repeated. In a surprising twist, they invited Earth's poets to help define the tame in metaphors so the database could learn emotional context. The result? The first hybrid system of logic and literature used in alien medical design. Back on Earth, schoolchildren were taught Maya's story not as a scientific breakthrough, but as a lesson in humility. Don't underestimate what's passed down to you, their teachers would say. Even the smallest thing, when given with love, can ripple through galaxies. The phrase "it's just Vicks" was slowly replaced with "it's Vicks," a quiet nod that sometimes things don't have to be complex to change lives. Perhaps the most poignant chapter unfolded on the 100th anniversary of her first Galactic Symposium. The United Systems of Medicine organized a reenactment of that now legendary moment, a jar placed on a polished table before a skeptical council. But this time, it wasn't mockery that followed, it was respect. Representatives from over 200 species stood up and rubbed a bit of Vaporub on their own sensory organs, in unison. The effect wasn't medical, it was spiritual. Across the chamber, beings closed their eyes and breathed as one. And then, on a small asteroid named Kelimara, once barren, now home to a monastery for contemplative healing, a seed planted by Maya decades earlier finally bloomed. A native tree, once thought sterile in that environment, flowered blue. Its blossoms carried a faint scent of menthol and eucalyptus, evolved through the soil that had absorbed years of Maya's efforts. They called it the comfort tree. Its petals were used in rituals of release, of forgiveness, and of starting over. In this way, Maya Ren never really died. She lived in the quiet opening of a jar, in the sudden ease of breath after hours of struggle, in the warmth on a fevered chest, in the kindness of a hand that offers help, even when it's small. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of known star charts, an alien child sneezes, and a parent, smiling gently, reaches into a worn cloth bag, pulls out a tiny blue container, and says, "Don't worry, this always helps." 200 years after Maya Ren's death, a cargo freighter from Earth made an unexpected detour during its routine supply run. The pilot, a quiet young woman named Aroha, was carrying medicine, water filters, and cultural supplies to a distant moon in the Cradle Reach, when new colonies had sprung up among the ruins of an extinct civilization. Her ship was aging, its AI basic, and she herself had no grand ambitions. But in her satchel, tucked between ration bars and a worn holophoto of her grandmother, was a small jar of Vicks Vaporub. She didn't think about it much. It was just something her family had always kept close, more out of tradition than necessity. Until the distress call came. A virus had broken containment on the colony below. Not lethal, but aggressive. Congestion. Difficulty breathing. Burning sinuses. The local medical tech couldn't parse the mutation fast enough, and the colonists were growing desperate. Aroha, ducking quietly under a blood-red sky, didn't offer them nanodrones or plasma meds. She simply knelt beside a coughing child and unscrewed the familiar blue lid. The vapor hit the air. Warm. Sharp. Comforting. A single breath later, the child stopped coughing. His eyes blinked open, wide. He smiled. He breathed again. Word spread instantly through the colony. It worked. The human balm worked. Aroha found herself making more of the balm from ingredients scavenged and synthesized, and before she knew it, she had recreated the old recipe. Not exact, but close enough. When she transmitted her report to Earth, she ended it with the words, "Legacy intact. Maya Ren lives." And indeed, she did. On stations orbiting suns Maya never saw, in cultures she never imagined, her blue jar became more than a product. It was now a universal symbol, the icon of the healer's vow. Medical students across the galaxy swore there was beside it. Starship captains carried it in their emergency kits not as equipment, but as assurance. Even androids, initially programmed with sterile logics, had begun requesting its formula be included in their emotional empathy modules. Entire disciplines of aromaneurology had evolved from her teachings, the study of how smell triggers memory, calms nerves, and aids healing. Vicks was no longer classified just as a bomb. It was called a neurothermic interface agent, a name that made scientists happy, even if Maya would have rolled her eyes at the rebranding. And then came the greatest irony of all. A message arrived from the edge of known space, from a race never before encountered by humans. Their ships were strange, their language unreadable, their biology incompatible with most galactic life. But their message was clear, a gift. Inside a sealed, glowing tube was a synthetic replication of Vicks Vaporub, reverse-engineered through long-distance analysis, created without any understanding of Earth's chemistry or human medicine, and yet, somehow, perfect. Attached was a note. We know not your planet, but this scent found us. It comforted us. It healed us. We come in peace, seeking the source. I've, humbled, replied with one name, Maya Wren. And as new generations rose and old ones faded, one tradition remained eternal, a quiet ritual passed from hand to hand, claw to claw, wing to wing. A jar was opened, a scent released, and someone, somewhere, breathed a little easier, because no matter how vast the universe became, no matter how far humanity wandered, comfort still came in blue glass, and healing still spoke softly, in a vapor that whispered across time, "You're not alone." Over time, Maya Wren's name evolved beyond language. To some, she was known as the breath-bringer. To others, simply the jar. In many cultures, her story transformed from historical record into sacred tale, a parable passed on to children nestled against the warmth of their parents, told under alien constellations in every tongue imaginable. Some versions remained faithful to the truth, a human doctor with nothing but a jar of mentholated ointment and generations of inherited wisdom. Others turned her into something more, a wandering spirit, a healer who appeared in times of despair, always carrying a tiny blue jar, always offering it to the sick with a quiet smile and the words, "This helps." And even when the details were lost to myth, one thing remained consistent. She never brought weapons. She never brought wealth. She brought relief. Centuries turned into millennia. Civilizations rose and fell. Stars died and were reborn. New species entered the galactic sphere. Earth itself changed, fractured, rebuilt, ascended. But in every major medical archive, encoded in memory crystals, etched into stone, carved into the walls of sentient forests, one small jar endured. The formula, the origin, the very molecular signature of Vicks Vaporub was preserved with care more sacred than most planetary histories. The descendants of Maya's own family, now stretched across planets and species through adoption and intermarriage, kept a tradition alive. On the anniversary of her birth, they would send a single jar into orbit around Earth. Not a monument, not a statue, just the jar, floating in silence above the blue planet she came from, a beacon of comfort in cold space. Eventually, humanity began pushing past even the galactic boundaries, sending out colony ships to other galaxies. Each vessel was stocked with cryo chambers, AI guidance, terraforming tools, and, always, a simple, unassuming blue jar placed in the ship's central medical bay. Not because they thought it would cure anything new, but because of what it stood for. On one such voyage, a deep space exploration crew awoke after a 1,000-year jump into uncharted space. Their senses were blind. Their navigation was scrambled. The ship was cold. Panic settled in, that creeping edge of isolation, fear, and the realization that home was long gone. A junior technician, barely conscious, opened an old metal locker labeled Emotional Stabilization Kit. Inside was the jar. He opened it, and as the first breath of menthol spread through the stale recycled air, his pulse steadied. His crew followed, one by one. No cure, no fix, just calm. A reminder that they carried something human with them into the unknown. Years later, when their transmissions reached back to Earth, they included logs from that moment. A simple message encoded in the captain's log. She still watches over us. Some historians say Maya's legacy is the longest unbroken tradition in human medical history. Others argue it transcended history altogether. Her name is now used for awards in humanitarian medicine, for ships delivering care to war-torn systems, for clinics built in remote zones of dying stars. There is even a planet, Mren 3, named in her honor, entirely dedicated to convalescent healing, where beings from across galaxies go not for technology, but for peace. And still, in the quiet corners of every world, From the volcanic mountains of Trekva to the floating sky cities of Lyranine, when a child coughs or shivers, when someone feels weak or lost or breathless, someone always reaches into a drawer, pulls out a jar, whether plastic, glass, alloy, or crystal, opens it, and says gently, "Don't worry, this will help." And across space and time, the vapor rises, the chest warms, and for a moment, everyone remembers Maya Ren, the human who healed the stars with a scent, a touch, and a love passed down through generations.